passionate about what we're talking about. So it's going to be helpful to kind of stay on track if we have something that we're kind of trying to stick to. Doesn't mean we can't go off track. And certainly we encourage everybody to just if there's something you have to say or some question you have, then just go ahead and we'll see what we can do. But the objective today, we have a survey to cover. We're going to talk about covered transactions, and we're going to talk about peer-to-peer networks. We're going to go in backwards order. So we're going to talk about covered transactions first, then we're going to talk about peer-to-peer networks, and then we're going to move on and touch on the survey that Matt was kind enough to get started with. So we'll jump right in. Are there any questions before we get started? Any comments before we kind of move along? And everybody can still hear me, right? Hopefully. Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, good. If you'll advance that, Matt. Okay, so, I have maybe I better put my glasses on. Ah, the okay, yeah, we can move on from that slide too, Matt. There we go. Okay. So currently, Regi covers these transactions, transfers that are made through ATM machines, point of sale terminals, ACH, telephone.
Am I the only one that lost her?
Yeah, Maggie, you just went muted.
There, I think you're back now.
It said Matt muted me. That was early, Matt.
No, my fault. I hit the wrong button.
Okay. So currently Regi covers these transactions that are listed on the PowerPoint. I don't need to run back through them, I don't think. But really the thing we want to take away here is, do we feel like this list should be reduced? And if so, what should be taken away? Maybe there's duplication. What should be taken away and why? I don't know if we want to go through each one of these and just say, and that might be what we do. Um, do we firstly transfers that are made at an ATM machine? What's the thought there on whether or not that should be covered by Regi? Keeping in mind, we'll reiterate this several times, that Regi is a very old regulation. I don't even think ATM machines were around. And if they were quite a bit more expensive than they are now. And not obviously utilized the way that they are now. So our transfers that are made through ATM machines, are those something that we want to keep as being covered transactions? And I think we can just do maybe, Matt, just a thumbs up, thumbs down on that. Because I still can't see everything. Do we have the ability to do thumbs up, thumbs down?
Is
Yeah,
the thought process that they just right? I mean, it's because they ride card rails. Is that why we feel like they're in the bucket?
I think they're in the bucket because they say they're in the bucket. Do you mean as far as them being covered, or as far as them being not covered?
Is the coverage based on the fact that they ride the card rails like a POS transaction?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm muting.
And we could tell the difference. That's parsable, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm a thumbs down.
There you go, Ashley. She says, I'm a thumbs down.
Yeah, maybe the best way to do it is there anybody who would want to keep this?
Well, in reality, do we really want to keep any of them? No, I'm just kidding. But I think that have to, in order to justify removing it, you would have to be able to tell the difference as to why it, even though it's meeting the same rail, why you believe it's different. So I just want us to be mindful of that, right? If you decide to keep one and try to get rid of the other, we would have to really explain the difference between the two in the industry's eyes, if that makes sense.
And I think from a system perspective, there's a different TRAN code on, so as far as differentiating, you don't mean on that side. I think
No.
I think what we
No,
have to
no, no.
look at is from the members' perspective, how is this different? How
Correct.
could this be defined differently? So when the members at the ATM machine and the transfer is taking place, what is different between that and a point of sale terminal?
Right. And what's the difference if somebody stole my card and used it as an ATM versus used it as a point of sale?
Sure. So
But I think some of this comes back to the point at the ATM, they have to have that PIN. And that's what kind of gets us is that we have members who wrote their PIN on their debit card.
yeah, and there is obviously a difference. We're obviously going to get into a lot. There's the EMV chip, there's the mag swipe, the fallback on the mag swipe. There's pin based, there's not pin based, and maybe we need to further define what we're saying here, because or what we're asking here, because there is a difference between a mag stripe with no pin and an EMV from a security perspective, and an EMV chip transaction at an ATM with a PIN. That means you had the card, someone had the card and had the PIN, um, versus, okay, I picked up somebody's card, I ran it through an ATM that has fallback, or not an ATM, I'm sorry, a POS terminal, and I did a mag stripe and I don't have a PIN, and there we go. So maybe what we're saying is that these two might be together. These ATM and point of sale terminal transactions under Regi might be together, but that it's how those transactions take place that maybe is the differentiator. That if it's in-person card present versus card not present. Is that sort of where we're kind of going? Does that seem amenable?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is just making sure that we can articulate what our decision is and the reason for it, because that's what's going to go a long way, right? Because when they see the stuff coming from us, they're going to think, well, of course they want to get rid of it, right? Because it's less they have to worry about. So if we can articulate, this is the reason why we do not feel they're the same. You're lumping them together because they're going through what you believe in your mind, the same rail. Because keep in mind, a lot of these people that make this legislation have zero idea how it really works on the back end.
Sure.
And so they don't understand the concept. So, because I'm the geek that watches C-SPAN and all these hearings, and I can tell by the questions that they don't understand the concepts of a lot of the laws that they're have oversight over. So I just want to make sure that we're articulating when we suggest the change, why we truly believe it's different.
So Terry has a good point in the chat. I think what we're going to find, and there's going to be a theme throughout all of this, is that we definitely want better clarity, because right now everything is too broad. But in producing better clarity, I think we need to be aware that the clarity today is not going to be the same as the clarity 10 years from now. So while we want things to be very specific and we want things to be very clear, we don't really have a way of knowing what everything looks like, 10 years from now. So to Terry's point, she's saying propose dispute clarity for ATM transactions that are chip based in fallback mode, PIN based, card not present, card present. Wendy, I'm looking at, sorry, tie back to member accountability instead of which rail it rides. Definitely member accountability is going to be a big theme of this as well. Wendy said, also, what about the ATMs that are allowing transactions without cards? And I think, Wendy, you're correct. Also, that goes back to maybe it's not necessarily the type of, well, it's the type of transaction, but sometimes how that transaction has taken place. Maybe it's not ATM and POS. It's,
Right.
you know, chip in, fallback, mag stripe, pin based, card present, card not present. Is that kind of,
Well, I'm kind of thinking maybe the whole reggie needs to shift from segregating, ATM, POS, ACH to the rail itself. Was the card present? Was the pen present? How is the transaction functioning?
If we do a good job of explaining the different ways of authentication and how we get on the rails, I think it sets a good tone for everything down this bullet point list, because it could be a chip that we can use in our favor to say, for those of us that are deploying all the most useful security features of these cards, we deserve protection from being liable from things that people are doing. And for those that choose to allow these more risky types of transactions, if they want to do that and not, be exempted from some of this reggie liability, that's on them. But I think that could be a pot sweetener to where if we have anybody that disagrees with us industry wide, they can keep doing what they're doing. Maybe there's some flexibility built into the reg to say, if you're using these security features, your liability is limited. And if you don't, it's not. So everybody can keep doing it their own way. But it should result in a safer network all around.
and it also then also ties back to accountability, member accountability as well, I think, Ashley, which is obviously a big part, a big problem, a big challenge here. Wendy, to your point, I think the only thing that I would question on lumping, kind of more basically everything together is that there are, with the way ACH is exists today, with the MICR number being on the bottom of any check and the routing number being on the bottom of any check, I'm just not sure about some of the security features that exist on the card side that maybe don't necessarily yet exist on the ACH side. So that would be my only just sort of question there. I do like, I think we're all going to the same point, which is we need some clarity. There needs to be more member accountability. I'm not certain here that we would take away or add to anything here yet. But maybe we need to, maybe on the clarity side, we're able to basically clear this up, restrict it a little bit. But we'll keep going through. So we covered a little bit of the discussion on ATMs. I think POS is probably going to be the same sort of challenges that we're talking about with ATMs. ACH systems. Did everybody kind of understand what I was saying about what some of the features are that exist with ATMs and POS and cards that don't necessarily exist with ACH? Is that just us, or is that everybody? Any comments on ACH at all? It just seems, it seems like now I have a member that had to open up a separate business transaction account so that he could give out the routing number and MICR number for payments to come in. And he said, but can't they just go out to several different websites and just put that information in and go? And yeah, they kind of can. So it feels like maybe with ACH, there aren't necessarily the steps or systems in place that we would be able to fall back on and say, well, yeah, you gave your account number and routing number, and so somebody was able to get that information and pull that out. Cassandra understands the ACH difference. What do we have to say about ACH systems and them being the transactions being covered by Regi?
They're already covered by the NACHA operating rules and the indemnification agreements between RDFIs and ODFIs. So I don't know why they ever got dumped in this bucket. I think the complication comes from the fact that the two rules overlap. So I think it's clearly arguable that that this transaction channel, this payment channel, is governed in another way that does take consumer liability into account.
Yeah, so there's a huge duplication here that maybe this would help clear up. Maybe this would help provide some clarity if it were removed, and just fell under the NACHA rules. Is there a thought on that? Thumbs up, thumbs down on that, or there we got Mike Rogers. Okay. So there's okay. Now we got them coming in. Now I know people are paying attention. Okay, so let's
Okay, so I have a question though. So
Okay.
I totally agree with that. You know, NACHA for ACH and everything, but then I feel like we should be able to lean on those Visa, MasterCard, Discover rules for the card services. Those rules are tight. Why do we have duplicated things that we're following here? We have the rules for the cards themselves. We have the rules for Reg E. I mean, we're getting kind of squeezed all over the place. Same as NACHA, you know?
I think the difference is, Wendy, and this is just my personal opinion, I take it for what it is. NACHA is a regulatory agency, and
Right.
Visa, MasterCard, and Discover, in their mind, are just vendors. Matter of fact, Visa and MasterCard are in the hot seat right now and have been in many hearings right now because they think they've got, like the fact that there's only two major players in the card space. And so they have been arguing and litigating heavily against the monopoly of those two. So in their mind, they're just companies. They are not regulatory bodies. So I think is that they're not really going to care what Visa and MasterCard have to say or what their rules are. But NACHA, because it's different, it's not just a random company in their eyes. I think that's where we're going to win the argument on the NACHA. And
I
that's
think
just my
that-
personal opinion. I'm not saying
N-
it's right
well,
or wrong, but just
it's-
from what I
it's-
see.
It's not, I mean, it isn't necessarily just opinion though, Deborah. That is the fact is that NACHA is the NACHA is a reg. So you know, we can all argue on the Visa, MasterCard and what they should and shouldn't be doing. And Wendy, to your point, you're correct that one, there's way too many things to worry about, but also yes, the Visa, MasterCard, those do dictate how we are handling those transactions. But I think the fallback on ACH is that it is regulatory. NACHA is regulatory, so that there would be grounds for maybe that being moved out, and then we can work on and we'll touch on that a little bit with the peer-to-peer, I think, in the next slide. But I think that's basically the reasoning behind maybe the thought of moving ACH out of it and handling it itself. Either that or somehow make NACHA and Reg E a little more cohesive. And that sounds like a big undertaking. So any other thoughts on ACH? Mike, yes, Visa and MasterCard are definitely in the pockets of the merchants. Okay. Telephone bill payment plans where there's periodic or reoccurring transfers. Any thoughts on this removal? It seems, I say it seems archaic, but we do still have members that handle payments this way. Thoughts on that? Yes, Ashley, zero liability. What are we thinking about telephone bill payment plans? Is that something that's going to be around? Is that something that we want to hang our hat on? Is that going to be here 10 years from now? Is it really a different sort of transaction these days than ACH, or then because some of these are then they come through one way and then they come on the other side and it's an ACH transaction. Ronnie, were you going to say something? I think I cut you off.
No? Oh, no, sorry.
Okay. No, that's okay.
Maggie, I'll say anybody who uses that system nowadays deserves what they get.
Right? That's what I'm wondering. I'm just wondering, is this one maybe we just kind of gloss over because the thought is that it's kind of on its way out? Or I remember thinking that our IVR system was on its way out and we cut it off and we got rid of it in 2012, and we still have members to this day that call in every day for that information, even though they're calling in on a iPhone or something. So, to me, it feels like it's a piece of technology that's probably on its way out. We can leave it where it is. It's not those transactions, I do think, sometimes come in and are governed by ACH anyway.
Those are not a headache to us in terms of like big losses or whatever. So I agree with you, Maggie. Leave it as is and let it die a natural death.
And Ashley has a good wording here. I support saving our powder for the ones that pose us more risk due to volume. All right, let's move on then. Remote banking programs. We are going to touch on peer-to-peer in just a minute. But the remote banking programs that are covering, Matt, I assume this was the account-to-account takeovers, the payments that are ebbed into online banking. Is that what we're covering here?
Yeah,
Can you clear? Okay.
It's difficult to separate it from P2P, but it is different. But it's, like you say, it's kind of in a similar vein.
So when we're talking about this, let's take out the systems that might be within our online banking. So the Zells, the whatever might be baked into your online banking. Let's pause on that and let's just talk about the account to account takeover. And I think, within the remote banking programs, this is also one of those where I think it was, who was it up here that said, it was Terry that said if we could have more clarity on the controls that are in place, and those controls, when they are in place, should make it so that the transaction is not covered. However, if the controls weren't in place, then maybe over here, is that, because I feel like our online banking system has all the controls in place, and the member stays on the phone with somebody for 4 hours and there's an account takeover that exists. What are the thoughts on online banking type programs?
I think here we get hung up in the definition of the authorized and unauthorized. This is where we get liability pushed on us because somebody fell for a scam. And it's one thing for somebody to do something without your involvement entirely. That's clearly fraud. But if you gave your information away and allowed somebody to access your systems and you're just disappointed about how it turned out because they were lying to you, I think we need clarity there between what's authorized and what's unauthorized. I like kind of separating it into two lanes where if there's any member involvement at all, then that was authorized. And we're sad with you, but don't fall for that again. And if there was no member involvement at all, then that becomes something that was unauthorized.
And I think, Ashley, we can even push that a little bit more and yeah, and Terry said, or at least have a tiered level of responsibility. Um, Me specifically, I push back even more on the authorized versus unauthorized, or member involvement versus non-member involvement, because when I look at the controls that have to be within our online banking system per Rule 748, there has to be member involvement in order for the online banking fraud to take place. Now, whether or not it's member involvement that the member wants to admit to, their email account was hacked and taken over, but the number of steps that have to take place in order for for some sort of fraud to occur with an online banking, there has to be some sort of member I don't want to say fault, but we'll say fault that occurred. So I think that the clarity on what constitutes member involvement is also going to be something that we have to look at, because why are we covering a transaction that might be $20,000-$30,000 worth of transactions because somebody's email account is still using, I'm not even going to use the words or the provider, and they're using a password from 1994 that, they've been given the pop-ups that say that your password has been compromised. At some point there has to be some accountability. And I think obviously we have a theme here, but this one, I really push back on this, because I really feel like we have been required per regulation to put so many different controls in place, and those controls all exist, and we're still liable. Wendy said, that's been my argument for years. It's this one, I'll step off the soapbox, but this one is going to be one, I think that there is a case for there being online banking transactions that are covered, but to this day, I have a very difficult time determining which one of those I would feel, if I were the member, that I would want covered, knowing what I know. I get that not everybody knows what I know. I have elder parents. I understand that. But however, and also, this one's tough for me. Does anybody else have anything else on that? I think it should be covered. I don't know how or why it should be covered, but we'll get to that at some point, and we'll have to. The survey will clear some of this up. Right now, we're just having sort of some discussion. It seems like the theme is that we need some more accountability and some more clarity, and we're gonna try to provide that. But B, maybe the only one that it appears we could probably take out is maybe ACH, because it is covered under another reg. So if that is, let's see, is there a difference from stolen information malware that steals access and info versus member given under false pretenses? Wendy, yes, there is a difference. It would be hard to prove. It would be a hard thing to, on a system side, to prove, because the malware can take place because you're on the phone with somebody for 4 hours and you click on a link and you go over here, or it can also occur because you clicked on an email and you downloaded something and you shouldn't have. It's there is a difference. I think it would be and maybe that's something that we cover, that the onus is on the
Device
member
owner.
to prove. Yeah.
The device owner, like where did the malware come from? Like, it's on your phone or it's on your computer.
And how did it get there? They're gonna they're gonna say, I was on a site I shouldn't have been on. I clicked. They're not going to tell you that. They're going to go, I don't know. And well, can you check I don't, those of you that are at the very larger credit unions probably haven't experienced this, but will you come look at my computer is not something we'll get into either. Okay, I think we've the only other one, remittance transfers. Anybody have thoughts on that before we kind of move to, because I'm trying to keep this kind of rolling. I don't want to cut anybody off, but does anybody have anything on the remittance transfers that we want to cover before we get over to peer-to-peer networks?
Maggie, the
It's
only thing I'd say on remittance is just so the group knows there is a bill kind of in Congress and the Senate right now looking at taxing these. There's hopefully will be a kind of a loophole for y'all to maybe get out of what that looks like. And obviously that would just probably that tax would get passed down to the consumer. But just from the general awareness side of remittance transfers with everything happening on the immigration side of things in Congress and the Senate, this is something that they're looking at and trying to crack down on. So just putting my political hat on here, this might be something I would stay away from us maybe changing right now, just from the terms of Congress already has their eyes on this and they're motivated to do something from the immigration standpoint. So just so folks know that, I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, but just giving you that background so everybody knows they are looking at remittances, and other states are looking at how remittance transfers work and how they can tax them if they're going out of the country, because remittance transfers obviously always go out of the country. So just FYI.
Thanks for that information, Matt. That was helpful. Ashley, go ahead.
Mike, I was going to put you on the spot, Mike Rogers, and say, what's the interplay between remittance transfer rule and UCC?
Well, that's a great question, Ashley, and I don't know the answer to that right off the top of my head, but it definitely is there.
There's redundancy. We could maybe use the same type of ACH argument, like if we feel like they're governed by the UCC like all other wires, even though they are international.
Well, that's right. Now, of course, each state technically has their own version of the UCC, so that might detract from us being able to use that argument. But we can certainly look into maybe pulling it under the UCC. I don't know if all states have adopted that portion of the UCC or if they've changed it.
We can look that up. That's great. It's a great thought, though. Kind of staying with that theme of the ACH being ruled by regulation. I can look that up before we meet again, and maybe Matt has some expertise, or the league does, about whether or not that it's possible. But I do think, Matt, that was good information, because it seems like maybe that's one we'll just leave alone for right now, and then by the time we move this along, maybe we'll have more information. Okay, let's move on to peer-to-peer networks. These are my fave. I had to actually, when this first came out, I had to realign the fact that peer-to-peer didn't mean Napster, for those of you that are, in your 40s and 50s. But the Ashley's laughing, so is Mike.
I'm just thinking of all the malware I put on my computer back in the day with that.
I'm sorry to age everybody, but when P2P is also LimeWire, Matt says P2P is also person to person. So let's start by defining that we're talking about peer-to-peer networks, and we're talking about the Zelle, Cash App, Venmo, what the slide is saying here is that there's a lot of overlap. But for just a minute, let's talk about, well, how many, can you just maybe a thumbs up, thumbs down, who is now baking, who's now a Zelle provider? Okay, Ashley is, Mike is, Megan is, okay, so we have a lot of people, a lot of you have partnered with Zelle. So, nope, Tanya, I will share that we have not. It's something that just as an aside, within the Zelle contract back in the day, I don't know what it is these days, they are basically given access to the transaction and transaction narration of your members, which then allows them to market to your members if they so chose. So back in the day, I decided that that was not something that I was at all interested in. If there is analytics being done on transaction narration within my member's account, I want it to be done by me. So we do not do it. So I say that so that you guys understand that I'm not the expert in the Zelle transaction, how that all sits. I do know because I've used it. As of March, they went away from the app, which I felt like would have put more onus on the member. Maybe there was more fraud, but it put more onus on the member because the member had to go into the app and had to go and set things up. The member now, correct me if I'm wrong, the member now goes within online banking and sets that account up that way. And then the limits that are on those transactions are enforced by the institution where they used to be enforced by on Zelle on the app. Is that correct? That you guys that use it have the ability to limit you have some control over dollar amounts, stuff like that? Okay, that is correct. Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. So, should those peer-to-peer networks shoulder some of the liability for the transactions that go through their networks? My thought is that if they are not going to shoulder the liability, they should at least be easier to work with to determine controls, how the transaction occurred. If they are the party obtaining the authorization, yes. So do you feel the same way about Zelle as you do about Cash App and Venmo? Because those now are different. Those now are they're sort of processing differently, right? Do we agree that they're processing differently, that those are taking? Do they drive any fallback limits in order to authorize? Terry, I wish I knew the answer to that question. I'll have to educate myself, but maybe somebody else can pipe in. No, actually have less fraud with Zelle than the others. So, right. So, Claudia, I think that's because those are being now handled within the, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, within the online banking program or within the online banking module application. Now Zelle is, so there's almost like a secondary set of security that maybe makes it so that the Zelle liability would maybe be a little bit different than, let's say, the Venmo and the Cash App. I feel like there is a differentiation now that there wasn't before March. So in March, I would have said that, Zelle on the app was the same as Venmo, was the same as Cash App, in how those setups occurred and how those transactions and transfers took place. But now it appears with Zelle's most recent move that maybe they are set up a little bit differently. It should the expectation be, and it seems like they were saying yes, that there would be some expanded liability to these peer-to-peer networks. Yes. Are they still requiring you to provide them with all the member info, not just those that are using the rail? Oh, I don't know. Deborah, I know that they used to, and that was where we just weren't interested in that. And does anybody know if they drive any fallback limits in order to authorize? Terry's asking that. And if not, we're going to take this. We won't spend too much time on the questions that we don't have answers to, but Matt and I will, do some research and see what we can provide, and then either send it back out or we'll talk about it next time. So the feeling is that there should be some liability, right? Yes.
Yeah, and I think that they're also, we kind of go back to the same argument in my mind in relation to Visa And
Mhm.
right, is that really Visa having rules, even though we have to comply with them and you're in a contract, it's no different than any other contract liable thing. You have to follow the contract of whoever vendor you utilize, but we probably couldn't use them in an argument to remove this particular, that there's overlapping rules, because in their mind, they're going to go, well, you chose that person to do business with, if that makes sense. So in their mind, it's not overarching, unlike NACHA, right? And RDP and different things like that.
So we are kind of coming to the theme that if there is a reg where there's an overlap, that maybe we'd like to remove so that there isn't an overlap. We'd like for the transactions that don't have a reg to be covered possibly. And then the ones that do, then we can talk about those and maybe where the liability might exist. And under that, where the liability exists, some member accountability.
Agreed.
Okay. How are your institutions handling the various rules and regs? So Visa, peer-to-peer, real-time payments, NACHA. I get that that's a pretty broad question. Is there one, are you handling it the way we're talking about where, okay, it's Visa, but this reg is covering it instead, or it's peer-to-peer and it's coming, and this is happening, it's peer-to-peer, but now it's coming in through ACH. And so it falls under NACHA. And are you then saying, okay, well, we're going off of the NACHA limits and the NACHA timeline, or how is that working? This would be a good time to speak up. Take yourself off mute and have a conversation.
Yeah, it gets a little. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, go right ahead. I've talked enough.
No, come on, Wendy, let's go. We can come back to Deborah.
Okay, so I know that we do not offer Zelle, but because of the real-time payments and RDC and so forth, with the Fed, we do have Zelle payments coming through. And while Zelle is getting really good at monitoring fraud and catching transactions before they actually are implemented or processed, there are still issues where people are disputing transactions. And we will tell them up front, you'll have to contact Zelle. We do not have a relationship with them. We do not have anything to do with this whatsoever. Unless you're telling us point blank that it's completely unauthorized, that it's just outright not yours, we're not touching it. And the ones that tell us that it's just straight up not theirs, then we treat it as ACH.
Okay. That's a good point. Fun fact, if you go to, I think it's NerdWallet, and you look up peer-to-peer networks, it says on there to the consumer in writing that banks and credit unions are not liable for transactions that occur on a peer-to-peer network, which is not true. But it is, I think that's very interesting. I saw that and I thought, oh, I wish I could take a billboard out on this. Okay. Deborah, what'd you have to say? You were going to say something also. Thanks, Wendy.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, this one is where it gets a little tricky, and unfortunately, what has happened, the department usually sends stuff over to us with an exact scenario and asks us to then say, okay, how should we handle this particular scenario? If it's not clear,
who sends it to you?
Our disputes area.
Oh, okay.
And so they send over to us a specific question if it's not black and white, because the rules, even though they all talk similar, it's not completely contradictive of each other. So you can comply pieces of all of those things, right, and still not contradict each other. So where they feel that there's like a little bit of ambiguity, for lack of a better word, right, that's when they usually submit it to us and ask our opinion.
And what are you, when you're asked your opinion, what's your fallback?
Ready, usually.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought. Anybody else on, how you're handling the fact that there's multiple rules and regs, timelines? I'm assuming that we're all defaulting to the shortest timeline of the possible covered payment.
Yeah, and I would jump in, Maggie, and say this question kind of came from me because as I was talking to people, we're realizing that you all have these different timelines. And so what I was trying to get at with this is what Maggie just said. You guys are credit unions are adhering to the shortest possible timeline. Generally, what we're hearing that's the card payment folks, and I am assuming, I guess, that that's what everybody is doing, but that's kind of what we were trying to get. I wanted to get at with this question is where exactly which timeline are you all paying the most attention to? And is that something that should be subbed in or should the regulation be broader because you're already complying with these third-party timelines?
I think that most people are defaulting to the shortest one. Like Maggie mentioned, just to try to hedge our bets of not being out of compliance, but that's really, cutting into our ability to use all of our investigation tools to limit, our own liability. So, yeah, Terry, I see your comment. When examiners are in, they are looking for compliance with Reg E. We had that experience with our payment specialist earlier this year. And that was the concern. We left with their comments about, make sure you're complying with Reg E, and in doing so, you're not violating NACHA. They're looking for sure. Yeah.
And they're looking, to be fair, they're looking at the regs. That's what they're supposed to be doing. We just had an electronic payments exam also, and that is what is being looked at. But that's also what their job is to look at the regs and to make sure that we're complying with each of the regs. I think to Matt's question, I think the answer is, and anybody feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but you're defaulting to the reg because we're being held to compliance with the reg for the most part, and otherwise it's the shortest time frame. It kind of bumps. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Maggie. I was going to say, and it's the most publicized out there. If for litigation arguments and stuff like that. So I think a lot of times when the members may not be aware of NACHA rules and all these other things, right? In their mind, they're thinking of the dispute process, Reg E, and all that kind of stuff. So that's where it's mainly litigated. So I think that's also one of the reasons why we chose that route.
I also think the members just throw out that they're covered with the insurance, the quote unquote insurance. Anyway, so that it jumps us a good kind of segue into consumer liability tiers. That's what we're doing, default to Reg E, risks related to non-compliant. Yeah, no kidding. The risks related to Mike Rogers said the risks that are related to non-compliance with regulations always kind of play in the back of our minds as well. Deborah, unfortunately, that happens with, that happened with ADA, whatever it was, 10 years ago. Should consumer liability tiers be adjusted? I imagine different credit unions are handling this differently, but the $50 liability is 2 business days. The $500 liability is the 2+, and then the unlimited liability is 60+ days. The $50 liability, how are you guys handling that? I know on a lot of ours, if it's under $50, we're just taking it as a wash a lot of times because of the limitation on the number of days. So what's the thought on some of these liability tiers? We don't have to talk about whether or not we would change them to, $100, or would we adjust them? Would we like to see them adjusted? And I think the answer will be yes, I would think, just based on the fact that because this reg was written so long ago, $50 was a lot of money a while back. But would we want to see these tiers adjusted?
Maggie, in that vein, I think we would all say, yeah, we would like to see them adjusted because they haven't been adjusted in a long time. But I see a potential trap for us in our conversations about other advocacy efforts. Like we've been really vocal about trying to get other thresholds that apply to us increased in our favor because we want everything indexed to inflation. And if we stayed with that message on this, it's not in our favor. So I don't know if that matters, if anybody would ever call us on that or whatnot to say like we wanted indexed inflation and increase when we like it and we don't when it increases the consumer stuff, but we would need to be prepared, I think, with a good argument for that if just in case we got called to the carpet on it.
I think that's a good point. We're talking about CTR threshold limits. We're talking about modernization as a word on several different advocacy efforts, as you mentioned. I do think there's probably a way to adjust this just for under the modernization, adjust this for the fact that it was written so long ago. Without, and one of the considerations I think we'd also want to, Terry said reg CC threshold adjusted every 5 years also. Yeah, I think that we would want it to sort of align with something so that and indicate that so that this isn't something we're coming back to 10 years from now and 20 years from now. But to your point, Ashley, I think you're right that we do have to be cautious about that. That could also work for us if it's a concession that we made in exchange for other considerations. Yeah, great point, Brandy. Brandy, yeah. So we'll have to be I don't know, I guess pretty specific or concise about what it is we're looking for here, but I think the general feeling is that it needs to be adjusted. Matt, we just have a couple minutes and I really want to touch on the survey real quick. So I believe you guys, I think it was part of Matt's meeting notes. There were 13 or 14 questions that had, kind of multiple choice. We were there before we move on from this. Yeah, there we go. Thanks, Matt. Were there any really strong opinions about anything that needed to be removed or added? Because this information, I think, is really what is going to help drive what it is we're getting the message back from credit unions about, what needs to be changed. I did ask Matt, I think at some point we have to quantify some of the work that we have to do and some of the dollars that have been lost and some of the hours that it takes because our people are data driven. And so there is going to have to be an opportunity for us to provide some of that information and gather some of that information. But what was created here, I felt like was a wonderful start. And there is some quantification within it. So before we go, because we have 3 minutes, is there anything that anybody felt like was really strongly agreed or disagreed on this? That would need to be changed, added? Brandy, it looks like you have a point.
Yes, I was just going to point out that the number of hours that the team spends is going to be variable based on the asset size, how many members you have, et cetera. So that might be better as a percentage-based remark. We could also add the hours along with the numbers, but I just think showing that percentage might be helpful as well.
That would, percentage is a good idea. Good point. Because it is very different. It's also different based on, how many FTEs you have and, where you're located. I know in South Florida, I think we are either top 3 or maybe top 1 of fraud. So yeah,
I might give you a run for your money on fraud in Florida.
Yeah, right, Deborah?
It's not a contest we want to win, Maggie, but
nope, we'll let you have it. We'll let you have it.
Exactly. We don't want it.
Brandy, that was a great point. Is there anything else here? This probably won't be the last one. But I think it does give us some information that we can take away to try to drive some of our future conversations. Any points, any questions, any ideas? Strongly agree, strongly disagree?
Well, I was just going to add to what Brandy was saying about the number of people. We are a small credit union and we've outsourced
Oh,
our
okay.
dispute process. So that dramatically reduces the number of hours that my staff is putting in. So
So
the-
Wendy, when you put it in, when you answer that question, um, I wonder if you should either put mm,
I would say estimate what you're paying for in the contract from FTEs with the third party and notate that, because you don't want it to look like you're only spending, because your staff is only spending so many hours on this task,
Right.
but
1
you're
to
paying
10, but
someone to do 50 hours a
exactly.
week on that task. So that makes a big difference, right? Because so I think it's, as long as it's notated somewhere so it can be, I don't know if Maggie and Matt are planning to do it on like an average, like take our asset sizes and average the asset size and then average the thing, or are they looking at different tiers based on asset size? But I think it'd be helpful just to make sure that you're getting accounting for all of what you're spending for that particular task.
well, and I think that'll kind of be up to this group. This is I'm no expert. But I think that as a group, we've got a good group of people. We've got a good representation, diverse representation. So we'll take the results, and if we need more clarity, then we'll get more clarity. But to Deborah's point about Wendy, I definitely think you have to at least estimate what's happening. Somebody was just popping up. Somebody said something. Okay. Patricia said, if anyone's willing, I'd love to connect after this meeting about how your FI handles account takeovers. Do you take away access to online banking or card? Patricia, you can reach out to me if you want to. She lists her email address over here. We absolutely take away online banking access. So I've sent the survey to our dispute team for feedback. What's the timeline for getting any suggestions to you? Cassandra, I really think we want to put it out so that so that we can have some sort of discussion and results by the time we meet again. Matt might have a better idea on timeline, but I think we could wait if we do two. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, Deborah's saying to you, Patricia, that reach out to her as well. The timeline, Matt, do you?
Yeah, so you are correct. And then I know we're running a little bit over time. So really the only thing we had left on the agenda for everybody was to talk about the next meeting. I think we're probably going to skip it and work on the survey if that's okay with everybody. July is a big travel month for folks. So what we were thinking and what I was thinking is if you have in it any input or edits, maybe by the 4th of July holiday, if you could get them to me. And then after the 4th of July holiday, we could send out the draft survey to folks, maybe to the
Task force.
Task force. Sorry. So you can get y'all's feedback and then try to get it into the field by August, if we could. So that's kind of the timeline I was thinking. But I was going to ask everybody today if that sounded feasible. And then sort of adjust based on that. And I guess the first thing would be, and it sounds like most people will just skip the July meeting so folks, so we can work on the survey type of thing.
I would like, if it's okay with you, Matt, I think a July 1 deadline is a little bit easier because of when that 4th of July, we obviously we'll take feedback until then, but July 1, and then we'll try to get the survey out to the task force by the end of July, and then looking to get it implemented in August. How's that sound, Matt?
Yeah, that's perfect. So
Okay.
as long as everybody has enough time to get things back to us, I'm perfectly okay with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comment? Thanks, Cassandra. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Appreciate your time and effort and information.
Hey, Maggie and
Yeah.
Matt, I was just going to say so many of these questions, the last one that popped up in my head is asking, when do you issue provisional credit? My mind went back to my experiences at various size, asset size, and number of FTE financial institutions. I think it'll be critical that we get the information about the number of FTEs overall, but also those that work dispute, or if you want to define in what area, but also asset size, because the answers to so many of these questions, and if it's outsourced, so many of those are going to be tied to what resources are. I mean, that, whether it's, and then our analytics of whether it's a percentage or number of outsourcing, whatever those results look like, but just averaging numbers without taking into consideration what those resources are by FTE, asset size, outsourcing, whatever, that's going to tell a very different story. Because usually provisional credit at a smaller institution with limited resources, you either just go ahead and give provisional credit, set your limit if it's at a certain dollar amount. It's just easier to move on, but that spreads quickly in a small community of, hey, they're going to pay anything. But if that's what it costs you, or go ahead and get provisional credit, don't even wait the 10 days, because that takes an additional step in the procedures and another chance to miss that 10-day window and you have a violation, you're not in compliance. So I think the answer to so many of those are going to be dependent on resources. So
I think we can put, Terry, just before we wrap it up, I think one of the areas that Matt and I have tried to be really cognizant about is how short this survey is, so that we actually get some feedback. And I think if we put it just right at the top, what's your name, what's your credit union size, what's your asset, what credit union size, FTEs, asset size, and then maybe just a quick question of, what's the estimated FTE for your fraud efforts? And it's going to be broad. It's not going to be specific. But I think that probably would give us some information that we could then use from the survey. Take the survey results, combine it with what we're looking at, and to your point, I think it is. Yeah, Deborah says 10% to you is not the same 10%. Well, 10% to her is not the same as 10% to me. But good point, Terry. All right, guys, I'll let you go. I appreciate the time, and we will talk soon. Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thanks,
Bye,
Matt.
everybody.
Much.
Have a good afternoon.